American women in the 21st century are, under the rule of law, not used as instruments for the fulfillment of male needs, as they had been in previous centuries, but are seen as independent actors. Much of this progress has come about through the work of activists. During earlier centuries, factors like economic necessity and wartime enabled women to take on professions and to earn an income, but for the most part, up until the modern era, they have almost exclusively occupied the territory of the household. So this is my presentation, how the political rights of women in America have evolved from the 17th to 21st centuries. So here we have a 17th century piece of text where a husband is defending his wife's right to punish his female servant due to her unwillingness to work. This document indicates to us that during the 17th century, men were required under law to justify their wife's treatment of servants. As we can see in this document, he's claiming that beatings must sometimes, upon such idle girls as she is, be lashed out. He's trying to justify the behavior. What this means is that either he was accountable for his wife's behavior, or his wife's political voice was so inaudible due to pre-existing norms about women's legal rights that he had to speak on her behalf. In Skemp's article, we learned that in early American society, being poor was an even greater hurdle to obtaining political rights than even being born a woman. During this time, in New Spain and New France, masters appear to have been more accountable to their slaves under the law. Women during the 17th century, while lacking the opportunities to gain education for financial independence, autonomy, or the right to vote, had at this time the legal right to not be subjected to unjustified bodily harm. During the 19th century, women's suffrage became a political movement unto itself. As the struggle for equal rights and the right to vote was underway, many attached this political movement to abolitionism, both of which argued about the constitutional guarantee of equal rights for all. For young women during this era, education and prospects for future employment largely depended on the financial situation into which they were born. Those who belonged to poor families became economic assets and worked at a young age, whereas middle and upper class young women were able to receive education so that they could gain a form of independence later in life. The gender hierarchy was defined by a split between the home sphere for women, where they were expected to do household chores, while the public sphere, the world of business, was exclusively for men. Women were expected to be, quote-unquote, pious, pure, submissive, and domestic, and to pass these virtues on to their children. Alexis de Tocqueville, who can be seen here, viewed the role of women in society to necessarily be secondary to the husband. He believed that the American woman should be a housewife, who was considered virtuous for subjugating herself to the man's authority. He believed that the man by natural right assumes the position of authority over women as every association must have a head in order to accomplish its object, and that the natural head of the conjugal association is man. On to the 20th and 21st centuries. With the passage of the 19th Amendment, the 20th century saw women gain the right to vote. This also likely impacted the social expectations for what roles women could hold in society. During World War II, women were forced to take on professions within industries that were traditionally male-dominated. This created a social and cultural change where women were appreciated for their capacity to contribute. After the war, the men returned to their professional duties, and many women voluntarily returned to leading domestic lives. The struggle for women to gain the right to use contraception has a lasting legacy in the work of Margaret Sanger. Her writings about the infantilizing effects about existing contraception laws has had a significant cultural impact, which likely led to legal changes giving women greater rights over their own bodies. The battle over women's reproductive rights has been a hot-button issue in the culture wars for quite some time. The religious right, primarily those of Christian faith, has imposed its values on the culture since the beginning of America up until the present day. This includes Reagan's America, where censorship of perceived transgressiveness was predominant. Although significant progress has been made in women gaining their political rights, there are still many who believe that there is still progress to be made in the way that women are perceived by society and represented in the culture. And these are my works cited.